Okay, class, second examination is over. We're now on the third block of instruction here, so I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Alrighty, so today we're going to be talking about religion, a little bit about education, and so forth here. And so anyway, now I want to flip to my camera here, and let me show you some individuals here. And I'm not trying to make card players out of you at all, but everybody know who this is? Well, supposedly for people in the know, that's King David. That is King David. And do you know who this is? Well, for people in the know, that's Charlemagne. Charlemagne. And if we move on here with the King of Clubs, that's actually Alexander the Great. And for this individual here, this is Julius Caesar. Or that's according to some individuals here. And I wonder where I got this. It says Boomtown Casino. And I'm not even a gambling person anyway, so I'm not really sure where I got that. Alrighty, so let's get into today's lecture. We're going to be talking about religion quite a bit at the first part of the class period. And I think the last time we were together, in fact, it was right before your examination anyway, I mentioned to you that during the High Middle Ages that religion had fallen into a all-time low. People avoided the church. They just stayed away from the church here. Most of the monasteries, and I'm going to show you a lot of photographs of monasteries in just a few minutes, but most of these monasteries have been taken under private control. They've been bought, and they were not religious institutions anymore. And we're going to see a change to take place around the year 910 with the monastery at Clooney. Now, Clooney is actually a place which is found in France, and it was an attempt to consolidate all of these Benedictine houses and bring them under one roof. And they were referred to as these Benedictine houses here. These were the Clooney Acts, and I know it sounds kind of funny to use a word such as that, but that's what they were known as. So we're bringing about religious reform. Now, in the for the Clooney Acts, they demanded from their monks, they demanded life from the priests, they demanded life of celibacy, and you know what I'm talking about with that, that's sexual abstinence. They also demanded simony, or actually the elimination of simony. Simony is the buying and paying for church positions. So in other words, if your family was wealthy enough, like I was telling you about the other day with that John the 12th, at 18 years of age, he became the Pope, and his family was wealthy enough that they could contribute enough money to the church that they could actually buy his position as Pope, if you can imagine that, and I certainly cannot imagine that today anyway. And so that's going to be a strong point within the church here. Now, it was also around this period of time that they developed what was known as the College of Cardinals, or what you folks probably just refer to as Cardinals. Now, these are bishops today, anyway, that serve as advisors to the Pope. These are it's called the College of Cardinals. They are subordinate to the Pope. The Pope doesn't answer to them, but they do give the Pope direction. So it was during this period of time, about the year 1000, that we did see the College of Cardinals to emerge. Occasionally, if you're traveling into Rome itself and you go over to St. Peter's Basilica, you might see some of the cardinals. It's not an unusual thing. For that matter, you might even see the Pope. At a later time, I'll show you where the Pope's apartment is, where the papal apartment actually is. I'll show you in a photograph pointed out to you with that too. Now, the principal changes that are going to come about during this period of time are brought about by a couple of individuals, and one person I certainly would like you to know is Gregory VII. Gregory VII, his pontificate, the time in which he was Pope, was 1073 to 1085. I don't hold you responsible for dates, but note those dates there. Just look at the dates there. And this is right around the time of the First Crusade here. And if it had not been for the efforts of Gregory VII in bringing about religious enthusiasm, there never would have been the Crusades. It just would not have taken place here. All right. So he's an important individual to recognize here. Now, some of the things that he was opposed to, this is who Gregory VII was opposed to, was lay investiture. Now, I don't know if you understand that word here, and it's your business whether you go to church or not here, but if you attend church, you are a lay person. You are a lay person. You're considered to be a part of the laity. Perhaps you've heard about that before. And what Gregory VII was opposed to was lay investiture. This is saying that we have a person that has great influence, and this person can influence who a priest will be chosen. Now, let me try to restate that. We have a person in a city that has a lot of money, has great influence there, so he can determine who the priest will be. You could even get it to an even higher level where we would have lay people with enough money and enough influence might be able to choose who bishops or archbishops or who even the Pope might be too. And that's what Gregory was against here, of lay investiture, in which the lay individual could be able to choose who religious figures are. And he felt like, that the church should be able to choose their own leaders. The church, the College of Cardinals, should be able to choose who the Pope will be. Now, another thing that he was, Pope Gregory was against was that of fornicating priests. And you had to put a little bit of thought into this. Now, remember, the church demands a life of celibacy for those individuals associated with the church, and I'm talking about in religious positions like that of monks or bishops or priests or whatever. And so at this time, the priest could actually be married. Priests could be married. And so Gregory was against this, and what he was demanding was that the church, the laity, cleanse itself of these fornicating priests. These are priests that were married. And really what you're going to see here, folks, is the church will do away with that. You can no longer be married after you are ordained. All right, now, another thing, and we talked about this the other day, about canon law. Now, canon law is church law. Canon law is church law. It goes by several titles here. Sometimes it's referred to as a decretum, if you will. Sometimes it's referred to as the Concord of Discordant Canons. And this would provide for ecclesiastical jurisdiction in all cases pertaining to the clergy, and also problems associated with marriage, inheritance, and wills is what I'm talking about, and the rights of widows and orphans. So what this means is that the Pope and the Cardinals have to be knowledgeable of canon law. They must be knowledgeable of church law. Now, we use a term to describe this. It's called a papal consistory. The papal consistory, which are the Pope and the Cardinals. It is the final court of appeals within the Catholic Church itself here. All right. Now, another influential individual, and I think just as influential as that of Gregory VII, and a little bit after the time of Gregory VII, was Innocent III. Innocent III. His years of his pontificate, 1198 to 1216. So think in your mind, if we go back to some of the leaders that we had earlier, this is about the time of Richard the Lionheart and also his brother John. All right, so Innocent III, an important individual associated with this, and was quite influential in the management of affairs for the European leaders of that time here. Innocent III. We'll have more to talk about with him in just a jiffy. So let's move on here. And I'm not going to hold you responsible for Boniface VIII. It's a good story with this. I like this story. In some of the textbooks, in editions of our textbook, they actually have likenesses here of Boniface VIII. And some do not, and I think your current one does not have one. But anyway, Boniface VIII, and around the year 1300 anyway, became crossed up with the French king, Philip IV, Philip the Fair. And where the controversy came, it was over church law. And there was a misbehaving priest at that time, he was actually a bishop. And anyway, the church wanted to try him in church laws or in canon law, whereas Philip IV wanted to try him in the civil systems itself. And anyway, before I tell you the end on that, Boniface VIII was so vain that he actually had statues constructed of himself while he was still living. And that's just something that you just don't do. Statues are created after an individual passes away with that. All right, but anyway, when Philip IV became fed up enough with this, he actually took Boniface VIII, the Pope, and he placed the Pope in prison, if you can imagine that, you know. It was extremely humiliating to the Pope Boniface VIII at that time. He was only kept in prison for a short period of time before he was actually released here, but nonetheless, it just crushed his spirit, and he died not long after that. All right, so anyway, that was Boniface VIII, not responsible for that. Where did I get off to with camera here. Okay, now another movement that's going to take place here that's associated with this period of time is a movement which is called the Cistercian Movement. So work on your pronunciation with this, with the Cistercian. We're just seeing an advancement, a reformation in the church itself. In the Cistercian movement, these were monks who followed the Benedictine rule in the purest way as possible. They would live in monasteries as far away from civilization as possible. You got to remember here, if you have the monastery and the monastery is close to where the city is, there are too many influences there, too many negative influences to be present there. So the idea was to take the monastery and move the monastery as far away from human life as possible here, so you could remove all distractions that were present there. All right. Now, there was another group that was a kind of a side order to this group, which it was referred to as the Carthusian Order. And I'm not going to hold you responsible for the Carthusian Order. I do want you to know the Cistercian movement. But these were monks that lived in separate cells. They did not eat meat. They fasted 3 days a week on bread, water, and salt. Now, let's see, I want to show you something here, too, and I'm going to put this under the camera. And I've always found this to be amazing here. Let me adjust my light here so you can see it a little bit better. This photograph was taken in Ireland. And if you look up on the hill here, can you see what appears to be like an igloo, appears to be like a house or something like that? All right, now the monks that would live here were referred to as Beehive Monks. Because it kind of looks like a beehive, but Beehive Monks there. And that's where they would spend their lives of silent prayer and solitude with that. And would you believe me today that it's become fashionable in Ireland for people to actually rent out those Beehive Monks, beehive structures there, it's like a hotel room, and people can actually rent those for whatever reason. Give me the Holiday Inn or someplace similar to that here, folks. All right, but anyway, let's get back to the Cistercian movement. Now, I'm not talking about the Carthusians. I'm talking about the Cistercian movement. And we're going to see some big changes to take place here. And one of the things that the Cistercians are going to stress is that of liturgy. Liturgy. Now, liturgy, and I want you to recognize this word, liturgy means rituals. These are church rituals. And they stress that instead of these long, silent hours of meditative prayer. All right, so we're stressing liturgy. This is rituals. And another thing that's going to come out of this, let's see if I can read my writing here, and we're going to move away from the worshiping of saints. And follow along with me. Move away from the worshiping of saints to that of the worshiping of Jesus and the veneration of the Virgin Mary. The veneration of the Virgin Mary, the mother of all, merciful, and the believer in the salvation of all sins. This is a big movement in the church. Prior to this, the church recognized and worshipped and venerated that of patron saints, and particularly St. Peter. St. Peter was the one patron saint. And supposedly, anyway, that St. Peter was crucified in the area where St. Peter's Basilica is today, and crucified, and some of you probably are familiar with this, crucified upside down. And the story says that the reason he was crucified upside down is that he did not wish to be crucified in a manner which would replicate that of the crucifixion of Jesus. So the crucifixion was done in an upright position, if you will. All right, and the stories are that St. Peter's bones are down in the catacombs, at St. Peter's Basilica to this day. I've never been there. I've been to St. Peter's Basilica on several occasions, but I've never been down into the catacombs. I think it takes a little bit of leverage and a little bit of pull and also a little bit of money to get yourself permission to go down to the catacombs and be escorted with that. All right, so let's go back here, and I want to tie this in again because this is really, really important here, class, to stress on this. Up until this time, we had the worshiping of saints, but now we're going to see a change in which there is a stress placed upon rituals and liturgy within the church, and also now the movement towards the worshiping of Jesus and the veneration of the Virgin Mary. So big, big change within the church here. Okay, now, all right, let's spend a few seconds here about liturgy. And this is not difficult to understand here, but I want you to recognize this term here, and this term which is known as transubstantiation. Transubstantiation. And go ahead and write that term down, and as you do so, put over to the side of it, just like I wrote in front of you right here, folks, the Eucharist. the Eucharist. Now, what this is a miracle. It is a miracle that is performed in the church during Mass. You may have it in your own church today, but it is a miracle that is performed between the priest and between God, in which we have a transubstantiation made, in which the body and the blood of Jesus Christ are transformed into blood and wine. All right, you know what I'm talking about with that too. The body, the flesh, and the blood of Jesus are transubstantiated into wine and into the flesh. Now, I'm not sure if I said that right, but I think you understand what I'm talking about with that. It is a miracle that takes place on the altar. It takes place on the altar with that. All right. Today we refer to it as the Lord's Supper if you go to a church in which that sacrament is practiced right there. All right. It is the Eucharist. It is the Lord's Supper, or sometimes referred to as transubstantiation. It is a miracle that takes place. Okay, so back we go to our camera here. Big changes taking place within the church here. And I want to go back here to Mary for a second here. And the veneration of the Virgin Mary, which is so unusual here because women prior to this time were seldom revered. Actually, sin had entered into the world through a woman. But now the cult of marriage is produced during this period here, around 1200, 1300 anyway. And you'll see many, many churches will take on the name of Notre Dame. Notre Dame. It actually translates to mean Our Lady. Our Lady, Notre Dame. And today, if you're traveling, and particularly in Europe, you'll find Notre Dame churches here present in Paris, and Chartres, and Reims, Amiens, Rouen, any of the major cities there in Europe, particularly in France, will have these Notre Dame cathedrals there. All right, very interesting with that. Okay, you'll see this in your textbook also here about a German nun and visionary by the name of Hildegard of Bingham, and she would have these visions, and she would give these visions in Latin, which she would give visions of Jesus, or visions of God and the angels there. Okay, so anyway, she was a German nun and visionary. All right, now we're going to see some movements to begin to emerge out of this that are going to be a little bit different groups. And one of these groups here is called the Albigensians. The Albigensians or Albigensians. Sometimes you'll see it written as the Cathars, the Albigensians, or the Cathars. For this group here, they believe that everything in the material world is evil. The human soul is actually good, but it's encased within an evil body here. These were the Albigensians. This developed in Italy today, as we know as Italy, and also in the southern parts of France. All right, you may think that there's really nothing unusual with that, and I would not either here. And then we had another group here, and you can't read my writing very well, and this group, which is called the Waldensians. So you had the Albigensians and the Waldensians. This is Waldensianism is what it's known as. They wanted to imitate the life of Jesus Christ in the purest ways possible. All right, now I ask you, good folks, do you see anything wrong with that? Do you see anything wrong with that? And quite frankly, I don't see anything wrong with that. But if you're the Pope at that time, such as Innocent III, you could construe this as being like heretic groups. These are heretic groups. They're different in the church itself. So a number of inquisitions will be ordered against these alleged heretic groups here. And the Waldensians and the Albigensians are going to be literally tracked down like dogs here. It was not uncommon to have torture, burning at the stake, anybody that differed with the philosophies there of the Catholic Church here. Now, all of this was referred to as inquisitions, So let me show you the word that I'm talking about here. That was Innocent III that was talking about there. With the inquisitions, torture, burning at the stake. An inquisition is actually an investigation. And what you had was people like Innocent III and Gregory VII that would call upon the laity to ferret out, to find these people that were considered to be heretics. And often this was done with great enthusiasm by the lay people within the church. And as I said here, burning at the stake, torture of those individuals here. All right, now this is kind of strange because we're going to see another thing to occur here is the emergence of these friars. the emergence of the Friars. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and I almost forgot this a while ago before I get into the Friars. And I told you a few minutes ago that I was going to show you a number of photographs of monasteries. So let's take a few seconds here before I forget this and it's gone and our class period is over. So let me show you some of the monasteries here. This is known as the Jasnej Góra. This is present in Poland, by the way, if you get a chance to go in there. And there will be, I am not kidding, there will be at least 2,000 individuals inside of this church here. But you'll find the Black Madonna. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. You can look that up on your own if you wish to do so. But the Black Madonna, which is found there. Some of the other monasteries that we have, this is Melk Abbey, which is found in Germany. It's found in the area, it's found in Austria, by the way, found in the area of the city of Melk. Very, very beautiful there. Don't pass up that opportunity to visit there. Even close to where we live here, this is always fun to do. It honestly is. If you go up to St. Bernard Abbey, and particularly take the time to visit the Ave Maria Grotto. Some of you probably have done this before. I went there last year, a couple of years ago. I'd not been in 60 years, something like that, when I was a kid. But it's amazing here, the dedication of one of the monks there, Brother Joseph. And Brother Joseph just dedicated his entire life to creating this like little Jerusalem and all these places here, like St. Peter's Basilica, just reconstructing that. You know, and it's interesting there. All right, and it also is a monastery there in Huntsville, Alabama. And this is a fun place to visit too, and I recommend that you take the time. You know, I'm not trying to make religious zealots of any of you, but take the time to go to the shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament, Our Lady of the Angels Monastery is located in Huntsville. It's a beautiful place. It honestly is open to the public. You won't regret that. You know, even if you have a casual interest in this sort of thing here. Okay, so anyway, that gets that off and off our plate here, and let's go back to friars. It's a little bit different here. The friars are not like monks. Now they are celibate. They're celibate, but they don't spend their lives in quiet, silent, meditative prayer. For the friars actually get out into the public itself. They'll go out into the public. Or some of you probably are familiar with the Robin Hood individual, Friar Tuck. So you kind of know what I'm talking about with that. Okay, so you're committed to a life of celibacy. You don't work other than you work for God. So you have to beg for your subsistence. This means that you have to spread the word of Christianity, but you also are in what am I trying to say? You're appreciative of any food or drink that might be given to you. So those are friars. All right, so I want to go back and tell you about two different orders of the friars. We have one group here which is called the Dominican Order. It was founded by St. Dominic, and back in the times we're talking about in the High Middle Ages, you find that many of the university professors were Dominicans. They were Dominicans, a very well-educated group here, responsible for a lot of the Inquisitions, by the way. And then we have another group of friars, and this group, which is called the Franciscan Orders. The Franciscan Order. This was founded by St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi. So let me take a few seconds here and show you a couple of things here. All right, here's an article which is about St. Francis of Assisi. Here, you can read about his boyhood, early manhood. He was born into a wealthy family, but he was a religious individual. So we actually threw away the clothes of a wealthy individual and donned the clothes, you know, of a pauper. Let's see here. This photograph was taken in Sardinia, Cagliari, Sardinia, St. Francis of Assisi here. And that's a statue of him anyway. Here. And miraculously, let's see if I have something right here. And can you see this? And you cannot see it very well. This is the area I want you to look at right here. And St. Francis of Assisi supposedly developed the stigmata. So if we look here, look at the hands here, and can you see the nail holes? Can you see the nail holes? Now that represents the nail holes, the scars and nail holes of Jesus when he was crucified on the cross. And supposedly, That's what St. Francis of Assisi developed over a period of time. He developed these holes in his hands here. All right, now I have to tell you this story here. You know, I've been teaching for a long time. I'm in my 48th year of teaching, and in all that time, you can only imagine some of the, how shall I put this, some of the different students that have crossed paths with me along the way here. And I'm talking about some real different type people here. And one day I was giving this lecture about St. Francis of Assisi and talking about the stigmata that was here, the stigmata that was present here. And I had a young man in my class who was sitting kind of in the back of the class, and I could tell he was fidgeting around, and he was wanting to talk about something. And I don't have a lot of conversation in my classroom for whatever reason anyway, and I don't know why. And anyway, he was motioning like he wanted to show me something. And sure enough, I said, well, whatever your name is, what do you got on your mind? What do you want to talk about? And lo and behold, and all the class members were looking at him, and he held up his hands like this. And honest to goodness here, there was a stigmata that was present in his hands just like that. And I thought the guy had taken a marker and had marked, you know, a circle within his hand itself. And I said, well, what is that in your hand? And he said, I got a tattoo in the middle of my hand, such as it. I said, well, okay, you know, whatever makes you happy with that, but why did you do that? And he said, I wanted to be a friar. All right, so anyway, and I'm not being negative with that, but that's just a real story that actually took place with one of my students. Okay, so this honestly was, in this period of time, an age of faith. People were now going, in the high Middle Ages, people were returning to church. They were going to church in great numbers. But I will tell you, a lot of this, the Catholic Church is making you go to church. You're actually being forced to go to church. Okay, so let's move on here while we still have a little bit of time here, folks. Now, we've been talking about religion, but in addition to this, we also have fabulous intellectual accomplishments, and I'm talking about academic accomplishments to take place during the High Middle Ages. Number one, we'll get the spread of primary education, and number two, we're going to see the spread of universities. See the origin and the spread of universities. So let's spend some time with this. Now, during the times of Charlemagne, I did write it down here. During the times of Charlemagne developed court schools. We all know what this is. It was originally designed to teach aspiring priests and monks, to teach them, just educate them, teach them Latin, teach them just the basics of fundamental education here. And what we're going to see during this time, however, we're going to move away from these court schools, and it's very similar to a court school, but we're going to see the buzzword for those times was cathedral schools. And once again, it was designed for aspiring priests, or aspiring monks anyway, to get them educated. Taught by a lay person, but over a period of time, it moves away from teaching monks and priests, teaching them, educating them, and it actually gets into the education of the public itself. All right, so these are cathedral schools. That's just the basic schools that we have. But during this time, we're also going to see the emergence of universities. The name actually translates to mean corporation or guild. Universities, corporation, or guilds. You should be able to identify this because you're in a college classroom right now. It may be a virtual classroom, but nevertheless you're in there anyway. Okay, it originally offered instruction in liberal arts, in law, in medicine, in theology. What you folks are in right now, you're in a liberal arts program. If you're in my class, you're probably in a liberal arts program. You may be in a nursing program, something like that. But most of you are in a liberal arts program, and you're not in a law program at this time, or medicine, or theology. Theology is a study of religion here. But I have no problem with that. I'm a firm believer in liberal arts education. I think when I was your age going to school, I wasn't real fascinated with that. I had a major in chemistry and a major in biology, and that's what I wanted to do. All I wanted to do was take biology course and chemistry course and occasional history course because I liked history at that time. I couldn't understand why I had to take the English courses, psychology courses here, and that just didn't fit into my mindset at that time. And it wasn't until years later that I finally realized, what rounds out a good college college education, and it's a liberal arts program. It's being able to understand basic composition, English composition, and literature, and psychology, and art. And I have a fascination with art today, a fascination with psychology, but I didn't at that time. And lo and behold, I became a history instructor, so I don't know here, I always believe it's just a lifetime of education with that. Okay, so anyway, you're going to see that much of what we have in our universities today is taken from the high medieval times, All right, here, so some of the earliest universities, University of Bologna, this is in the northern parts of the Italian peninsula, college university here, which is University of Paris, and I just slipped up with that, folks. I did not mean to say that. When you're in our country, we talk about colleges, and everybody understands what you're talking about. But if you go to other areas of the world here and start talking about college, they get an entirely different impression. If you go to Canada, for example, if you mention college is a trade school. If you go to South America, and down in South America, the Latin American countries, you'll see little kids attending collegio, play on the word here, college. And it's like high school. And I shouldn't say little kids. I'm talking about young adults right there, too. If you go to Europe, you don't recognize college. It's universities there. If I told people in Europe when I'm visiting there that I am a college instructor, they would have no idea what I'm talking about. So you have to kind of exaggerate a little bit and say I'm a university instructor. Then they can understand what you're talking about with that. Okay. Oh, and I should not have taken the camera off of me. And I'll just keep you from having to look at me for a few minutes here, folks. Never mind. Communicate better this way. When you go to Europe and you see these universities that are present there, it's not like Bevel State. And I'm not demeaning Bevel State with that. But these universities that are found in European cities, they're just, it's like in a downtown area, and you'll think that you're just walking around downtown businesses there. It's nothing like the college campuses, the university campuses that we have at the University of Alabama or Auburn or Bevel State or Wallace State Hansel or any place such as that, And so it's so totally different there. And in fact, unless you saw a sign that identified it as a university, you probably wouldn't even recognize it as a university. But we have a number of early major institutions of higher education. If you have your textbook, you can look on page 313, and you can see where those major universities were located. And anyway, some of them in England, we have Oxford and Cambridge. In France, you have Montpellier. In Spain, there's Salamanca. In the Italian, in Italy today, you had Naples. And it's always kind of fun, if you're in Germany, to swing through Heidelberg and take a tour of the castle that's present there in Heidelberg, and then go right down the hill from the castle and go by the university itself, and buy yourself a sweatshirt or a t-shirt so that you can walk around your college campus, kind of strutting around saying that I've been to the University of Heidelberg. All right, and that's kind of fun. Okay, now, during the High Middle Ages, the students, when you would start college, start university, I should say here, if you can imagine this, normally around 12 to 15 years of age, and that's not what we're accustomed to, but that's the way it was then, 12 to 15 years of age. As you can imagine, the professors, often had problems with immature kids that were disruptive, at 12 to 15 years of age, that kind of takes place with that. Now, the universities of those times in the High Middle Ages established the precedents for today. You had a bachelor's degree, and this was a degree that required about 4 years of education. During this time, you studied Latin grammar, rhetoric, that's proper use of words and sentence structure. Also studied logic there. So I want you to do the math on this. If you started at 15 and you graduated with your bachelor's degree, how old would you be there? Okay, and for some individuals, they will continue their education with a master's degree. Under the master's degree, it requires about 3 to 4 years, and you would study in this particular program mathematics, natural sciences, but not laboratories with that, and also study philosophy. Now, if we back up a little bit, in our education system that we have today, the bachelor's degree is designed to be completed in 4 years. Believe me, class, it's designed to be completed in 4 years. And I'm talking about in 8 semesters of 16 hours. If you're not taking 16 hours, you are behind with this, and you're probably not going to graduate in 4 years. So subsequently, you'll find that students will extend their bachelor's degree to 4 years, often to 6 years. They become professional students. And I'm sorry, that was kind of a negative thing to say about that. But when I went through college, it's just, we all finished in 4 years. That's just the way that it was. For those of you that know my daughter, Miss Barber completed her bachelor's degree in 3 years. I was very grateful for that. That saved me a year of college expense. A master's degree today normally takes about 2 years. About 2 years, you might squeak through in about a year and a half. So that differs a little bit from the master's degree that we had in the High Middle Ages. And for some individuals, they would pursue a doctorate. I want you to appreciate this very much, because it's not going to be long before we talk about Dr. Martin Luther. Dr. Martin Luther. All right, did you imagine this? In a doctoral program, which was ordinarily Doctor of Theology as a Doctor of Religion, it was 12 to 13 years. So let's say you started your college education at age 15. So if you started at age 15, how old are you going to be when you finish your Doctor of Theology? And the answer, quite frankly, you will be 15 plus 20, 35 years of age. Okay, now ordinarily, the class instruction was done in Latin, but and educated people, did speak Latin. But some of the great writings before this were written in Hebrew or written in Greek. So if you were a student and you only understood Latin, you couldn't read those writings here. So one individual, and I like this guy, I like the name here, and I'll tell you about him. His name was Robert Rustesta. All right, and he translated all of Aristotle's Ethics into Latin. He also made great advancements in astronomy and mathematics and in optics, too. And I always like the name Grosseteste, and I'm not going to elaborate on this too much. But he's an Englishman, but it's a German name. And if you ever see the name in German, Grosse, it means large. Grosse means large. I don't think I'll translate that word any further with that. All right, now another one of the individuals who was actually a student under Rustesta, another Englishman, was Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon was generations, decades, and centuries before his time. He actually predicted that one day we would have automobiles and that one day we would have flying machines. Okay, class, that's all I'm going to talk to you about today. We're still not through with academics and education. Next time we get together, you're going to meet some of the great instructors, the professors of that period of time, some interesting stories associated with those individuals, and a brand new type of education, an education type which is known as scholasticism. Okay, thank you for your attention.